One of the most important decisions a farmer can make is when to apply his fertility, and a lot of farmers want to put nitrogen on in the fall, but is that a good idea?
Well, you know, Brian, there's a couple ways to look at this. You look at it from a workload standpoint, but you also look for it as a, when does my crop really need that? And if you're putting out the plant food right about the time that your crop wants to eat it, that's awesome. That's the ideal situation if you have time to do it.
Yeah, but here's the other consideration. We've had this happen to us before on our own farm. We put nitrogen out, let's say as a side dress, and then we get zero rainfall after that. Happened all over the country this year. Guys went out, side dressed, didn't get any rain, nitrogen didn't move into the root system like it should. So there are two ways to look at this thing. Here's the big thing. On our own farm, we like to really spread that workload out. We want to get this stuff done in the fall so we don't have to worry about it come spring. So the main question that we're trying to answer is how much nitrogen can we safely put on in the fall without losing it? And even then, are we going to lose at least a little bit? So the thing where we wanted to start out with was cation exchange capacity.
Well, when we talk about cation exchange capacity, we're talking about the holding capacity of your soil. Cation exchange capacity is made up of three things. It's the type of clay, the amount of clay, and the amount of organic matter that your soil has. Now, when we get into different pieces of ground on our farm, this makes a huge difference in how much fertility we can apply, and I think that's what you're getting at, Brian.
What you use cation exchange capacity for when it comes to nitrogen is just multiply cation exchange capacity times 10. That'll tell you roughly how many pounds of nitrogen your soil can hold at any one time. Then it comes down to what form of nitrogen are you going to apply? Is it going to be nitrate? Is it going to be ammonium? What is it?
Well, that makes a huge difference for what you're doing. And the other side of it is if there's a big cost difference between one and the other. Let's just say, for example, anhydrous is way cheaper than putting on urea or liquid 28% or any other form of nitrogen. You're really tempted to say, you know, man, that anhydrous is so cheap, but I want to get it done in the fall because when you can pull anhydrous through the field in the spring, you probably could be planting already. So you say, man, I'm really tempted. I want to put more nitrogen on with anhydrous in the fall, but that may not be the right answer either, especially when you look at your cation exchange.
Well, I don't know why that's not the right answer. Anhydrous is the right answer if you're going to be applying in the fall. That's where we were going with this thing. Anhydrous is the best product for use in the fall. Urea would be second, and liquid 28% you don't want to use in the fall. The other thing is you've got to wait until those soil temperatures have dropped. The standard rule has always been when the soil temperature is 50 degrees or less and it's dropping, then it's usually relatively safe to put fall nitrogen on. But the thing is with anhydrous ammonia, and the reason why it's the #1 choice for fall application is it's immediately going to convert into ammonium. And ammonium is the positively charged form of nitrogen. That is the most stable form of nitrogen we've got. And the reason why is soil has a negative charge. So with ammonium, since that's positively charged, the positively charged ammonium will attach to the negatively charged soil. That's a great thing. The trouble with nitrate, when we start talking about nitrates, nitrates have a negative charge, soil has a negative charge. In other words, the soil is literally trying to repel that nitrate because they have the same electrical charge. That's not a good thing. We don't want our nitrogen in that nitrate form. We want it in the ammonium form as long as possible. So anhydrous is the best choice in terms of a fall nitrogen. But in addition to that, we would also encourage you to consider a nitrogen stabilizer.
I like, Brian, how this always works. You're doing something that may not be quite ideal, so we better put a little bit of protection in place to help keep us safe. Well, when it comes to nitrogen, what we're trying to do is prevent nitrogen loss. And there are a number of different nitrogen stabilizers out there on the market, whether it's N-Serve or Instinct, products that Dow manufactures, whether it's Nutrisphere N. There are just a number of different ones out there. How well do they work? Well, there's been a lot of university studies and independent studies to find out which ones work, which ones don't, and to what degree they work. And what I think is kind of funny is it all comes down to funding. If you've got a company that can fund a lot of studies, well, they can get a lot of data out there. And if you've got a company that says, look, I don't want to fund all these studies, I just want to put it on the ground and have farmers see that it works and then move my product that way. So you see one company that may focus a lot of energy on, I've got to get in all these university trials, and there may be another product that's just as good that, well, we don't have the budget to put into all these university trials. We're just going to get it out in the farm or work with our dealers and this kind of thing. Personally, I think the nitrogen stabilizers as a whole do a pretty good job. And I think there's a number of different products that we've used on our farm, and they've all worked to some degree. It all depends on what kind of weather you get afterwards. I mean, if we had a freeze come in and the ground got frozen hard, we aren't going to lose any nitrogen anymore if it's bound into that soil. But if we get conditions where, you know what, it stays 60 degrees all the way into late December for us, now we're at more risk of losing some of that nitrogen.
So what it comes down to with these nitrogen stabilizers is they're more likely to pay for you when nitrogen prices are high, when commodity prices are high, when you're applying a lot of nitrogen, and when you're applying it really early. Okay, so we've got all those factors in place right now, and that's the reason why we're using a lot of nitrogen stabilizers on our farm, and many people around the country are as well. So again, when we start talking about this nitrogen thing, it's fine to put some on in the fall, but you've got to really look at your cation exchange capacity. What can my soil handle? And then in addition to that, I would consider stabilizing that nitrogen so you have a better chance of reduced loss.
Hey, one last thing, Brandon. We talk about this a lot on our farm because we do have some ground that's floodable. We've got some that is right along the river, and if we get a big flood in the spring, hey, we may not get that ground planted. You've got to use your head. If you're putting on some nitrogen in the fall, put it on the fields that you know you're going to get into for sure, and you know for sure they're going to be corn or wheat or whatever crop you're fertilizing for. Don't put it on that marginal ground. Don't put it on that floodable ground. Save that for a spring application when you know for sure you're going to have a crop.
And the big thing again is just make sure that if your soil can't handle all the nitrogen you want to put on in the fall, don't put it all on in the fall. Put some on in the fall, put some again on in the spring, and maybe again put some on late in the spring or early in the summer. Split apply your nitrogen as much as possible because this isn't just about you, all right? Yes, it's about you in part. We don't want you to lose money. We want you to end up with the best yields. That's great. But it's about every other farmer in the country too, because just think about it for a minute. If you do a bad job, if we do a bad job of over applying nitrogen or putting on the wrong product, putting it on at the wrong time, where's that nitrogen going to go? Well, in a lot of cases with big rains, it's going to move down into the soil, it's going to get found in the groundwater, it's going to pollute somebody's water. We don't want that because all that's going to happen in the future is we're going to have more regulation. So just be smart about your nitrogen use. You can put it on in the fall, but you got to follow the steps that we talked about today.
One other thing you want to get right in the fall is your weed control program for next year's crop, especially if you have weeds like our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?